Hello, and welcome to the Art of Intuition podcast. My name is Susan Jane, and I believe that trusting your intuition is the best way to live your life with meaning and purpose. Each week you will hear about how you can connect, develop, and trust your intuition through interviews with other guests and my own personal experiences. Join me to understand how your intuition can guide you towards a life full of meaning and loving purpose. Hello and welcome to the Art of Intuition podcast. My name is Susan Jane and I'm your host for this podcast. And today I'm really excited. We've got Carrie in today. Now, I have been putting it out there on Facebook because it's Halloween coming up soon, and I just loved looking at Carrie's bio, like what she had there. And Carrie has spent 17 years as a professor in universities and areas like that. And then for some reason, she has made this big switch and is now a professional witch. Now, what a better, we couldn't have got a better subject just before Halloween. But it's that stigma around witches and that area around that we want to really look at. But I want to welcome on board Carrie. I'm not going to tell you about her bio because she's going to do it. So I just want to welcome on board Carrie. Hang on, let me add her to the stream. Hi, Carrie. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm so excited about this because we've not had a proclaimed witch. I mean, I know a lot of the stuff I do, you could put it along the lines of witchery, but to be a proclaimed witch after 17 years in academic studies, that is, I'm just loving it. So you've got to tell us a little bit more about your background. Tell us all about you.
Okay, thank you. I'm so happy to be your Halloween witch. It makes me so happy. So yeah, that's right. For 17 years, I was a professional historian and I taught at the university level. And, I was very involved in the intellectual life, right? In the rational world. But for my entire life, I've always been very fascinated with the mystical and the mysterious and the paranormal and the supernatural ever since I was a small child. And so it was always there, but it just seemed like it was a habit or not a habit, a hobby or like a quirk of my personality or something. And I purposely tried to avoid talking about things like that in my academic community because I thought I would be rejected or judged in some way. But in 2012 or 2013, I had what I call a religious, or better yet, a spiritual awakening. And what I think of as my awakening was really that I discovered that this supposed quirk of my personality, this interest in this hobby in the mystical mysteries of life, could really be a formal religious or spiritual path for myself. And that's when I really claimed the label of witch. And the term witch can mean all different things depending on who you're talking to. It's a real diverse kind of, I think, umbrella. But I think that there are a few things that witches tend to have in common. And that is a spiritual or energetic alignment with the earth and the changing of the seasons and nature. And we really identify with the earth as a sacred relationship that guides our spiritual path. One of the things that's pretty particular for witches, though, I think most would agree, is that we tend to believe that we can work with energy in really kind of deliberate ways, that we can affect our realities based on how we relate to energy. And many of us use physical objects such as candles, or incense, crystal stones, things like that, as symbols to help facilitate our working with energy or our spell casting. And I think that that kind of work can take different names based on whatever tradition or perspective you're coming from. But I think that that's what really defines a lot of witchcraft for me. It is that belief in the mystical mysteries of life, that connection to the earth, and that belief that we can affect reality by our relationship to our energy and the energies around us. But what's also really important for me in terms of being a witch is I'm also a feminist. And
Oh,
like
yes.
like I said, I've always been interested in things like, ghosts and spooky things and the full moon and, since I was a child, but I've also been a feminist since I was a child. Even before I knew what that word was or what it meant.
Is that why you studied women's history as your
Yes.
PhD?
Yes.
Ah, so you would have actually studied a lot of like the witches of Salem, that area, because I remember researching a lot of that myself, and it was
Yes.
so interesting.
Yes, absolutely. So, there's always been this common thread throughout my life, right? And another label that some people aren't comfortable with, feminist, right? There's witch and there's feminist, and I'm both. And for me, they really overlap because there's lots of things that we can say about feminism, but for me, it is about that empowerment of everyone, right? But looking at empowerment from the perspective of gender and sexuality. And I mean that in an expansive, inclusive way. And claiming the term witch for me is a feminist act because I think the denigration of women's power and women's magic and women's intuition has been a patriarchal weapon that has been used for generations. So claiming that
Absolutely.
term, right, it's an act of rebellion for me.
Yeah, that's why I've gone with intuition. Everything I do is intuition for exactly the same reason.
Yeah.
Intuition is connected, like witches, to that feminine aspect, isn't it?
Yes.
Whereas when men talk about intuition, it's like a gut instinct. When men talk about witches, well, they don't. They talk about warlocks. So it gives you
Right.
that
Right.
real feminine base. I love that. Sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't mean to interrupt. Keep going.
No, 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 please do. Yeah, so this is, it took me a while to integrate these two sides of myself, the academic, intellectual, and then the witchy, mystical energy kind of side. But now I realize, again, this commonality throughout all of it. My focus in my academic teaching and research, as I said, was on the history of American women, gender, and sexuality. And now, as a witch, I see that there's more in common there, right? In these two sort of halves of me than I gave myself credit for initially. And then, you might assume at first glance. And it is this need and this sort of burning desire I have always had to find women's lost voices and women's lost power and help, right, with many other people, help to resurrect those voices and help to locate women's power and contributions, first historically as an academic, and now I think in working primarily with women as a spiritual coach and guide and mentor and teacher to help them understand that they have this power and this wisdom and this magic within them. So these two sort of careers that I've taken on, I think have more in common than even I realized at first.
Absolutely. Because you think about it too, when you think about it in a logical sense, you have done the research, you've done the history, you've done the research, you've got the understanding, you've got that really, really good, strong base that allows you to go forward. It
Yeah.
allows you to take on this new uh, entrepreneurship, and go forward with it.
Right.
And I've noticed that with quite a few of the ladies that I've worked with and that I know, we were in our like past life, not, and I don't mean past life, I mean like before children, BC, I used to call it, before children, we were like this, or we did this. And now it's like we go forward and we're bringing all that knowledge and that understanding with us and incorporating them all together.
Right.
And
Right.
it's a lovely, but I have to ask one more little bit, because this one sort of threw me a little bit. I get where you're going now, because you're talking about women and the sexuality, but
Mhm.
what is this about Playboy magazine? I've got to get an understanding of this. This sounds like gold.
Trust me, I was as confused as anybody when I started on this journey with Playboy, and it has been a journey. So again, as an academic, my interests had always been women, gender, sexuality, with a bunch of popular culture thrown in there. And it was when I first started graduate school, oh gosh, almost 20 years ago now. Um, I was really interested in the 1950s, and I just started to wonder about Playboy, because I'd done a little bit of reading about it, sort of accidentally. It was just a chapter in a book I was reading about the 1950s and masculinity and popular culture. And I began to think, how did what I thought at the time, I no longer think of Playboy as pornography, but how did pornography become mainstream, particularly in American culture, in a decade that was very, very conservative? And in the United States, the 1950s are really thought of as a very buttoned up conservative era. And I thought, how did this magazine become so popular at that time? So I just started digging, and this started out, it was supposed to be a paper in one class in one semester. But once I started digging into the history of Playboy, it just opened up and unfolded time and again and again. And I realized there was oh, forgive me. Um, I realized that there was so much more to the history of the magazine than certainly than I had realized, but I think at the time more than anybody had realized. And so my research just became really rich, and it expanded through my graduate education. It became my PhD dissertation. And I ended up getting access to the Playboy Company archives in their what was their headquarters at the time in Chicago. And nobody had done research into these archives ever. I was opening boxes that had been sealed up in the 1960s, and
Wow.
it was so fascinating. There were people from the company saying, "Carrie, what's in those boxes?" And then they invited me to interview Hugh Hefner, and it just unfolded. In speaking of magic, right? This
Yeah.
magic for a graduate student. And I discovered that Playboy, and I'm talking about in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s, right? Primarily in a pre-feminist era. I'm not talking about based on our notions of gender and feminism and women's rights today. I
Yes.
have to be clear about that. But in
Yeah.
this pre-feminist era, I discovered that Playboy was much more pro-woman than anybody had ever given it credit for.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so as a feminist, um, I was shocked, and I was kind of scared, and I thought, "Oh my God, can I really say this? Is Gloria Steinem going to be mad at me?" As if she would, she probably didn't read my book. I'd love it if she did. But yeah, it just turned into this incredible journey, and it became a published book, and it was published in 2011, and I still, even in 2021, get major media requests to talk about Playboy, because apparently people can't get enough.
Yeah. I find it fascinating, especially to be opening up those boxes from such a long time ago.
Yes.
And you're looking at it in a different set of eyes, aren't you? You're looking at it with the knowledge that you've got, and the knowledge that you have now, and looking at it very, very differently.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
People were too quick to judge.
Yeah. And the things we assume, particularly from a feminist perspective about Playboy, that it was sexist and objectifying, all that stuff is true. It's not
Mm.
that it wasn't. It's just that there was more to the story that nobody had ever noticed. And
Yeah.
so the fact that I was a feminist really sort of being more objective, I think, than a lot of people had been, and was really willing to give Hefner and the magazine more credit from a feminist perspective. Um, it's just gotten a lot of attention, and it just keeps going.
That's amazing. I just, before we go any further too, Carrie, I just want to let people know that if they do want to connect with you, that you've got this special Facebook group. Now, it's a private group, so you have to ask to join. It's a Facebook group called Magical You, and it's about spiritual empowerment. So if you want to join that, Carrie can help you, or if you've got any questions or anything else, we can go from there. But I just wanted to make sure we get that in, because for the podcast, they don't see the little ticker tape going down the bottom saying join the group.
Thank you.
So okay, so you've done all that study, you have understood Playboy magazine and looked at it in that way, and then you've gone into being a proclaimed witch.
Mhm.
So how have you brought all that knowledge and that information forward to be able to because having such a logical, although you did say that you were both spiritual and logical to start with anyway, didn't you? Was it
Mhm.
hard to do the transfer over? Like, if somebody was sitting there listening to the podcast and going,
Mhm.
you know what, I've always been like that. That's what I feel. But I don't know what that next step is to take to move from
Mhm.
the logic to that spiritual side of things. What
Mhm.
is it? What was that calling that you had?
Um, there were those seeds that were always there. But it really took, and it continues to take, because that tension isn't gone for me. I still have to give myself permission to say, I can do this. It's okay that most people think this is really weird. I still get a little sort of twinge when I post things about witchcraft or intuition or energy or the full moon on my Facebook page, my personal Facebook page, because I'm friends with so many academic colleagues, and they're all wonderful people. And a lot of them are into this kind of stuff too, even if they're not as open about it as I am. But I
Uh,
still.
yeah, I have to agree with you. Sorry, I have to agree with you, because it took me a long time to post anything like this on my personal profile. I could do it on my pages, I could do it in the groups, but on my personal profile that had family and people from all sorts of walks of life, I did, and I still struggle a little bit too with it.
Yes, yes. I had to force myself. And I still sometimes feel a little bit uncomfortable with it, but I do it anyway. Um, and I think the important takeaway is that there are lots of people like us out there, right? As I said, even a lot of my academic colleagues who I never would have imagined, they email me or they send me a message and like, Carrie, I've never been able to talk about this with anyone else before, but there's a ghost in my house and we have dinner together every night or whatever. And most people are just kind. So my academic friends who are on my Facebook page, they're all lovely people. And so I think I was worried about judgment more than the judgment actually existed. But I don't think that this kind of, worrying about revealing your true self when your true self is spiritually oriented or whatever, I don't think it's just us. I think that so much of modern society um, really just shuns this way of being, this way of wisdom, this way of connection. And I think it's been like this for a long time, right? It's sort of the modern era, the modern Western way of thinking. Um, it's not science based, therefore it is unacceptable and wrong and silly. And so I think that so much of this is about, as you said earlier, embracing your feminine side, right? We all have these sides within us, masculine and feminine, but most of us have been trained, I think, to prioritize our masculine side, that rational, logical, assertive, action-oriented side, to the detriment of our more feminine side, right? That receiving, that intuitive, that energetically connected way of being. And I just think that that's very, very common. I think that that's probably most people, whether you're witchy or not. And I would say that's the problem with our world. That's why the planet is dying. So the more of us who can step up and say, no, I'm going to embrace this side of myself, we might have a chance of saving ourselves then.
Right. So I agree with you. And most of the guests I have on here, I agree with, because that's why we're connecting.
Mhm.
When we're looking at that feminine and that masculine side of it, we have been almost trained to be masculine. We've got that in us, and that's fine. That's great to have. I mean, I am very logical. I'm very organized, action taker. I have all that masculine side to me, but it's remembering to allow the feminine aspects to
Mhm.
come out too.
Mhm. Mhm.
We're allowed to show our feelings. We're allowed to express who we are. And so are men. Men are allowed to do that too.
Mhm.
There's no you or us. But I think
Mhm.
we have been almost programmed to be men, or to think like men, or to act like men, that we tend to forget how to be feminine. And when you're talking about manifestation, and you're talking about um, spiritual empowerment, you
Mhm.
are talking about allowing that feminine energy to come through, aren't you?
100%.
Yeah.
And it takes practice, right? You can do it in baby steps. You don't have to give up a successful mainstream career like I did to become a professional witch. Um, you can just take baby steps in your life, even if it makes you nervous, even if you're doubting, even if you think it's kind of silly, right? You can just start to quiet and check in with your intuition for 1 minute a day or 5 minutes a day. And the thing is, the more you do it, the more you will receive. And once you see this playing out in your life, then you realize how real it is. And
Ab-
then you become more comfortable. And then
ab-
you care less about what other people think.
Absolutely. Oh, that is so good.
Mhm.
The other thing I want to cover off too, well, first of all, I'm going to tell you another little ticky tape going down the bottom, and it's for your free manifestation guidebook. So Carrie's got a free guidebook on her website, and her website is ancientmagicmodernliving.com. And I just love that, because you are using the ancient magic to have a better life, for modern living. So I really, really love that. But what I wanted to talk about now, which has probably gone from my head, come back, uh, is no, it's gone. I can't remember what I was going to say. But yeah, jump onto ancientmagicmodernliving.com for your free manifestation guidebook. I remember now. We were talking about manifestation. We're talking about one of the subjects we were talking about is using magic to love your life and love yourself.
Mhm.
Do you have, and of course you're a witch, I've got to ask you, and I know I'm throwing you under the bus here, do you have a ritual or a spell or something very simple that people can start to use to either love their life or love themselves? Um, and I think maybe love themselves, because this may help them step from where they are to where they want to be.
Mhm. Absolutely.
So do you
Um,
have, I mean, I know, like I said, I've thrown you under the bus. I didn't give you any warning about this, but if you've got something, that'd be lovely.
I have maybe something half sexy and half unsexy.
Woohoo!
So much of my practice and what I offer to others is, I think, very simple, very down to earth. And even though we're talking about witchcraft and casting spells and things like that, I think it's very, very real world. And I mean, there are a million rituals that we can do, whether it's for self love or connecting with the energy of the moon or whatever. But I think one of the simplest places to start is with affirmations. If you're focusing on self-love, if you're focusing on prosperity or health or whatever it is, affirmations, but you have to know how to do them. I think one of the ways in which people go wrong with manifestation is they think, I want this thing. I want a $10,000 raise, right? And that's fine, right? And they think about a $10,000 raise and they think about money, and that's all great. But the manifestation doesn't work unless you change your relationship to the thing you want, unless you work on your energy surrounding that thing. So if we're, say, focusing on self-love and you need to work on compassion and forgiveness for yourself, you can create or certainly come up with, Google affirmations of self-love. I am worthy and valuable. I give love, I am love, right? There's an affirmation for you. There's a mantra for you. But you can't just say it. You can't just think it. You can't just write it in your journal and then walk away and forget about it. You have to step into the energy of your mantra or your intention or your affirmation and carry it with you throughout the day. So, for instance, if you were focusing on a mantra of self-love, and this is something that's coming up for me a lot because so many of the women in my community mention a lack of self-love and self-esteem and self-confidence as one of their biggest problems. That's one of the things they're most focused on fixing with spiritual practice. So I find it kind of heartbreaking, unfortunately, how sort of bad women feel about themselves much of the time. So that's why I'm trying to do a lot of work with my community on focused on self-love. So let's say you have an affirmation of I am love, I give love, I receive love. You need to focus on the ways in which you already experience love in your life and focus your attention there and focus on gratitude for that love over and over throughout the day. Maybe I feel bad about myself and I don't have a lot of self-love, but I love my daughter more than anything on this planet. And so when I start to feel bad about myself, I anchor into that feeling of love for her and I give thanks for it. And I hold that energy throughout the day. I come back to it over and over and over. And that is really the first rule of manifestation. It's not just saying, hey, universe, I want this thing. It's stepping into the energy of that thing in ways you already experience it. And then when you elevate your energy to match the energy of what you want to attract or manifest, you then create more. You then act like a magnet for that thing or that energy to manifest in your life in greater ways. So it's not super sexy, right? It's something you can do while you're brushing your teeth. It's literally when I do most of my manifestation work is when I'm standing in the bathroom in the morning, brushing
Yeah.
my teeth, getting ready for the day. I have manifestation rituals. I do. I have candles. I have all of that stuff. But the real work is in living it. And you
Yeah,
can live it by brushing your teeth or by
absolutely.
focusing on your mantra and your affirmation and your intention for manifestation when you're pouring coffee in the morning. I think that's what makes it so accessible to people. And that's what much of my focus is.
Wow. I understand what you mean, but the part that I really liked is when you're talking about with the self-love and with I've talked about mirror work with other people and doing things like that, and how challenging it is to like you say, look at these affirmations and go, oh yeah, I'm reading them and I'm saying them every day, but I'm not feeling it. But
Yes.
what you said was gold. You said, if I'm not feeling it there, where am I feeling it? And you reflected onto how you feel to your daughter and how that love instantly that connection is instantly there, energy's there, you have the feeling. And so I see it as it's almost like a fake it till you make it, but
Yes.
you're just using the support of
Yes.
knowing that you can love, you do love your child, knowing that you can love, to say, okay, that's how I feel for her, that's how I want to feel for me, that's how I intend to feel for me. And you start to work on it in a manner that is accessible to
Yes.
the ordinary person.
Yes. You don't you actually don't want to focus on the specific details of the thing that you want. You want to focus on the energy surrounding it. Because when you become that energy, when you focus your attention on that energy, you attract more. So if you want more love in your life for yourself, or you want a romantic partner, or more friends, or whatever it is, focus on love. Look for the love where you have it now and feed that energy with your attention. And it's important to say, right? Feeding that energy with your attention really means gratitude. That is the magic of manifestation, being grateful for what you already have. So if you want more money in your life, focus your attention on where you already have prosperity and abundance. You have it somewhere, right? Even if you don't have a lot of it, if you have a roof over your head, or even if you don't love your job and you're not getting paid enough and you really need more money, focus on the money you do have. You have food on the table tonight, or you have an abundant garden that you can feed yourself with. Focus on where you have that prosperity, where you have that abundance, and give thanks for it. Be grateful. This is where gratitude journals come in as a ritual, as magic. The more you focus on gratitude for what you already have in your life, the more you will have to be grateful for. And
Absolutely.
it's energy. Energy is like water, it flows,
Totally.
right? So if you're really focused on the abundance of your garden or the love you have for your child, that's abundance energy, that's love energy. It's going to end up flowing in all different directions in your life, and it'll eventually get to you.
Absolutely. I love that. And just for those people on the podcast too, if you want to contact Carrie, her email is Carrie, CARRIE, at ancientmagicmodernliving.com. So if you want to contact her, feel free to do that. And she can help you with that. So I just needed to get that through as well.
Mhm.
The other area I was going to say, I know with when I was first starting out and I was looking at the self-love and aspects of that, I struggled with stuff. Most of us do. Mine was the self-worth aspect.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and I used to, because I walk most mornings, and I created an affirmation, or I heard of an affirmation that I used, and I could use that. And there was days there that were, I was just speaking it or thinking it, and it meant
Mhm.
there was no energy connection. And then there was
Mhm.
other
Mhm.
days that you really felt it, and the
Yes.
whole walk that morning was like, whoa, 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 and mine was every day in every way, I'm getting better and better.
Yes.
And I use that affirmation because I I felt that that's what I wanted to do, get better and better and better. I didn't want to be the best. I just want to get better and better and better every day.
Mhm.
Whether that's financially, whether that's relationship, whether that's spiritually, whether that's health, I needed to,
Mhm.
feel that that was an affirmation I could do and I could achieve.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
in that way, it made sense to me and it made it real.
Yes.
And you, like I said, you can really, if people do something like that, you do feel that energy connection. Like I said, there's times there when it was like, oh yeah, right, yeah, sure I am. And then there was other days when you went, holy dolly, yes I am
Yes.
getting better. I
Yes.
really am, and I could feel it. And
Yes.
it made it so real for me.
Yes.
So yeah, so that's really good. What else have you got for us? I know that you've actually got a manifestation program. Hang on, I'll pop that one up so people can see it. You've got a manifestation program coming up in the new year.
Yes.
I know Manifestation Mindset 2022. I know we're a little bit early for that,
Mhm.
in putting that
Mhm.
forward, but Wow, that looks really good. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I'm super excited about this. Enrollment will open in late November and early December. So if anyone wants to go to my website and click on the link for the free guide, that will get them on the wait list for my manifestation program if they want to hear more about it when enrollment opens. But this is going to be a 1-month 2022 manifestation program. We're going to get started on the new moon in January, which it's January 3rd or 4th, if I recall off the top of my head. And we're going to spend the month working on some of the things that I was describing here, how to manifest. How do we use manifestation to create lives we love? And in the process, we learn to love ourselves. This is something that I think people in the manifestation world, who are out there trying to do teaching and things like that, I'm not sure a lot of people seem to not talk about, a lot of people seem to miss, is that when you're working on manifestation, there's always this goal, right? What we want to manifest. And we don't know when that manifestation is going to happen. That's up to the universe. That's up to divine timing. But in the meantime, the work that we're doing, again, to elevate our energy to match the thing we want to manifest feels so good. We end up feeling so much better about ourselves and about our lives. It's I don't know if it's the bonus or if it's the primary benefit of manifestation work, but I think a lot of people don't really talk about that. And so I want to work with people at the beginning of 2022 on stepping into this power and this magic, particularly because the last couple of years have been really bad for most of us. Right?
Yeah.
That's why I really wanted it to be a New Year program, because 2020 was horrible. 2021 was supposed to be so much better. And most of the people I know say it hasn't gotten any better.
No.
What I'm saying is take 2022 by the you know what and make it your year, right? Take
Yeah.
some control over the only thing you have control over, which is your own energy, and make it a
Absolutely.
good year.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds really good. And I know I've got family in Melbourne, in Victoria, Australia, and they have had the longest lockdown in the world. That
Oh,
city,
yeah.
250 odd days of lockdown, and I
Mm.
just feel for my family. They're so it's so challenging, and
Yes.
they've done nothing wrong, and it's so challenging. So
Yes.
yeah, to be able to go into a manifestation program and start the new year, just starting fresh. The
Mm.
hardest part for you, Carrie, as far as this goes, is getting people on board because of Christmas. That's what's really hard.
Mhm.
But if we can
Mhm.
get them on board now, they can get through
Mhm.
their Christmas and they can start to live a much, much better life,
Right.
um, and start to create the life that they want in
Right.
2022, which is really, really important. And all of it is about trusting them. It's about trusting themselves and
Yes.
being getting that understanding of it. So
Right.
that sounds absolutely amazing.
Right.
When you do that, you're going to be doing that online. Like, is that
Mhm.
we going to
Mhm.
be connecting online, like Zoom or
Yep.
something to that effect?
Yep.
Yep. Okay,
Yeah, we're
cool.
going to have 4 live online group coaching calls, and there's going to be a really detailed, inspiring workbook that people will have available to them for the work that they're doing on their own. We're going to have a private Facebook group for continued conversation and support and things like that. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And again, I think it's going to be really empowering and reminding us, right? Reminding ourselves that we do have some power and we do have some control when we focus on ourselves and our own spirit.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that sounds amazing. Okay, I think we've covered everything. I think we've covered off about magic. Did we cover up on the stigma around witches, which
Mhm.
you covered off on that too, because I still think that there's a lot of people that think witches are so busy casting spells on other people when the
Mhm.
reality is they're not. They're looking at their own spirituality, their own energy, and if they're doing any spell casting, it's on themselves and what they want, not necessarily about anyone else.
Right. Witches are loving, tree hugging, peaceful people. There are aspects of magic, what we think of as black magic or revenge magic, things like that. Those are possibilities, and I know people who practice that form of magic. People who support that kind of work tend to be from historically very disadvantaged communities in which that kind of power was the only power available to them, right? But witches, whether they call themselves witches, whether they do that kind of spell work or not, they're not doing it just to be mean, right? It's often protective or defensive. Um, and every witch I've ever met has been a very, very loving, peaceful person. They're
Yeah.
often very involved in social activism and environmental work and racial justice and things like that. So there is nothing scary about witches unless you fear women's power, unless you fear the empowerment of traditionally disadvantaged communities, right? And that's kind of the point, right? That's much of the reason why a lot of people step into this work. So, just as sort of the Halloween scary kind of witch, most of that's just pop culture. And historically, the denigration of women who practiced herbalism and things like that. Women who were historically healers. Those were the kinds of people who were targeted as witches in the past.
Yeah, as a negative connotation.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, instead of the positive side
But
of it.
if I can jump in and interrupt
Yeah.
and say, I know in the US, I think in Europe, I'm not sure about Australia. I'm sure you would know better than I do, but the number of people describing themselves as witches, including people joining the formal religion of Wicca, which is one certain type of witches, it's at record high numbers. It Witchcraft is the fastest growing religion in the United States right now. So
Wow.
there
Didn't
is
know
this,
that.
yeah, there is this stigma, but that stigma is going away. It's
Yeah,
really, really popular, and in a consumer way, it's actually very fashionable right now. But I think things are changing because more and more people are seeing the value in it. They're seeing the peace, they're seeing the alignment with nature and how necessary that is, and they're using this as a way to step into their power.
yeah, yeah. And it's just like you say, taking away that it's spirituality in different terminology, So religious religious organizations use their terminology. Spirituality is another terminology. Your witchcraft is another. It's just Buddhism. There are just all different aspects of a very, very similar thing. They all
Yes.
have rules. If it's a religion, if it's an organized one, or they all just have their beliefs and their understanding. So it's
Right.
just getting learning the different terminology and getting an understanding of it, and not being in fear of it.
Right, exactly. If you meet a witch on the street, she's probably the last person you need to be afraid of.
Exactly. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Well, Carrie, thank you so much for coming on the show. That was really, really enjoyable. I've learned a little bit myself too. I really enjoyed it, and I love the take that you have on it. It's so natural. It's so and it suits you. I
Thank
can't
you.
see you as an academic, but I can see you as a proclaimed witch. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it so much. Thank you for having me.
Oh, that's okay. Any last words? Just jump onto the website, ancientmagicmodernliving.com. There's a free manifestation guidebook on there. If you jump onto that and get that, you'll get the email. You'll be joined up in the email, and then you can understand, or you'll learn about the manifestation mindset for 2022. So that's lovely, Carrie. Thank you for being on the show. I'd love to have you back.
Anytime. I'm happy to
Cool.
be here.
Okay. Can you just stay on the line for a minute? I'll do the closing and then we'll get back to you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Okay, it's just me now. Wasn't that amazing? I loved it. Hang on, I've just got to change my branding, get everything ready to go. So you can join Carrie. She's got her own Facebook group. It's a private group, so you can ask for that one. So that's Magical You, Spiritual Empowerment. Otherwise, you can jump on the Facebook group that I run, which is Intuitive Personal Development. It's you don't have to ask to join; you just have to jump on and get all my stuff. Woohoo! But subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We've got some more things happening next week. Next week I've got Anne on. The week after that, hopefully we've got Cody on, our first male person to chat with. So, and we're going to get a male's perspective on intuition and what that's all about. So yeah, that's it. Otherwise, Facebook, you can tune in onto Facebook too for the weekly intentions that I do on a Tuesday morning. So Thursday morning is podcast, Tuesday morning is weekly intentions. All right, that's me for now. Hope you've enjoyed the show. I am going to press the right buttons and I'm going to say bye for now. Okay, see you guys.